an amazing story. It's two stories in one. It's what we call a Markan sandwich. Jesus is doing one thing, and then something else happens. There's this middle story, and then we go on to the next story. You know, we read the Bible a lot of times, myself too, and the stories start to sound like stained glass windows, and the smell of the church, and Jesus went to the other side of the lake, and a man came up. And this is an incredible story. It's one of those stories that you almost had to be there. We had a worship committee meeting this week, and we were reading a Pew Research study talking about how 8,000 to 10,000 churches close in America every year. And by a huge margin, 78% of the people, the reason they go to church is because they want to hear preaching that has something to do with their daily life, that is relevant, and is losing relevance nationwide. So let's try to dig into this amazing story and see how can this story be relevant to our daily life. Jesus is showing us who God is in this story, in these two stories, and showing us that God's priorities and logic are completely different than ours are. We have one more, Kate. I was looking at this. Doesn't the Sea of Galilee look like a human heart? Like not a Hallmark heart, but like an actual human heart, medical heart. And we have Jesus back in his day in the heart of three great religions, one which hadn't come to be yet, but crisscrossing this heart. And all of these stories. So he comes back to Capernaum, which is his hometown. Probably gets off the boat. He's probably sweaty. He's just been kicked out of a place for sending demons into a bunch of pigs, and they ran down the hill and committed suicide. And he's interrupted. This man comes up, a rich, wealthy ruler of the synagogue, and falls at his feet. I don't know about you, but Jesus never seems to be too concerned about being interrupted, does he? I'm not always so happy about being interrupted. I have places to go. I have things that I need to do. I'm late. I was coming to church this morning and somebody got out in front of me with a trailer. Don't you know I have places to go? Jesus doesn't seem to bother him. In fact, where does Jesus always seem to be heading? He's always heading to the root of sin, right? To root out the sin. No. In fact, he doesn't seem to be that concerned with sin at all. What he is concerned with, and what he's showing us that God is concerned with, and why this matters to us, or should, is that Jesus is attracted to human suffering. Your suffering, my suffering, the suffering of the people back then. Jesus is attracted to human suffering. And God seems to work in these interruptions or these seams of life back then and today. I don't know about your life, but it seems like when I'm interrupted, I'm diverted. I'm off somewhere where I don't know why I'm there. That seems to be a place where God seems to act. And I can't explain it, and I don't know why. So Jairus, let me have one more. Okay. So we're going to talk about these two people. Jairus comes and he falls at Jesus' feet. So we have a Jewish synagogue leader falling at Jesus' feet. How desperate is this man? He says his little daughter is at death's door. So I want you to just imagine the smell of the sea, the fish being gutted, the cats running around looking for scraps. And this man in a purple robe comes and falls at Jesus' feet and says, please help me. Any of you who've been moms and dads, if you think about this, imagine your little daughter wasn't able to breathe and she was dying. How desperate would you be to get Jesus or the doctor to your house? So Jesus goes off with it. That's what it says. It's nothing special. He falls at his feet, says, begs, and everything else. And then the text says, so Jesus went off with him. He's not in a hurry. He's forming relationships. Relationships matter. And then we're supposed to notice these details. What happens next? What happens next? And then a woman. And then a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. What happens? She interrupts the story. We have Jesus and this giant throng of people, and they're all tagging along, waiting to see what is Jesus going to do. How is he going to heal this child? And this woman comes and interrupts the whole thing. Who is this woman? And what is God telling us about who God is because of this woman? Who is she against Jairus? Jairus is a rich man. This woman spent everything she's had. She's been bleeding for 12 years. She's poor. Jairus' name is Jairus because he's a man. We don't even know this woman's name. Jairus is ritually clean. He's the synagogue ruler. This woman is not allowed to touch the flesh of another human being because she's ritually unclean, because she's bleeding. She's been bleeding 12 years. Jairus' daughter is 12 years old. You see how Mark is telling us all these details? There's a reason. We're supposed to be making connections with all of this. What is Jesus telling us about God when he comes to a full stop and says, who touched my clothes? Imagine you're running back to your house, dragging the doctor. Your child is choking, and the doctor says, wait, who touched my clothes? You're going to be freaking out, right? You're like, there's a giant crowd, and it says his disciples are like, dude, please. Well, they didn't say dude, but probably not. But there's 1,000 people around here. There's a child that's choking to death, and you want to know who touched your clothes? Seriously? We have the rich man here. Jesus says, no, it's not enough to simply say power went out of me and healed somebody. I want to know who it is, and I want to know the story. And we're coming to a full stop. And this woman freaks out because she has just touched, who knows how many people she's touched because of her faith in Jesus' power to change her life. She's made them all ritually unclean. She's in big trouble. Jesus says, no, we're stopping. Full stop. I want to know more about you as a human being, as a person, as a woman. Who are you? And we're going to make this guy wait. This is Jesus showing us that God wants to form relationships, and that relationships are more important than time, than being on time. Maybe more important than death. This is a short video.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space where someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, I'm down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, huh? No. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, "I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me." Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So I love that part about judgment because we love it so much. Does Jesus judge this woman? No. Does he scold her? No. Does he say, "How dare you make me ritually unclean because now I may be unable to heal this man's daughter"? No. In fact, what he does is he gives her a name, and she's the only one that he gives this name to. He calls her daughter. We have one more again. So he stays out of judgment. Then what happens? We've had the first slice of bread, we've now got the meat and the lettuce of our sandwich, and now we're going back to the other piece of bread in this sandwich. We're back to Jairus. And we have these sarcastic sort of jerks that come out and say, "Your daughter's already dead. Good job, Jesus. Some prophet you are, some healer you are. Why bother the teacher anymore?" And Jesus says, "Don't fear, just trust." And he starts to narrow things down, doesn't he? He sends the crowd away. He takes the big three, Peter, James, and John, and he's starting to narrow this relationship thing down. For a while, didn't you get the sense it's just Jesus and this woman talking? There's all this commotion going on. People rushing around. And it's just Jesus and this woman. Now Jesus is starting a narrowing process down with Jairus. Can you imagine how hard it must have been to kick the crowds away? But he told them to go away. He brings the big three, Peter, James, and John. They go to the house. There are mourners crying. And he says, "The child is just asleep." And they laughed at him, and he narrows the focus more, and he kicks them all out. And then he goes into the room with the child's mother and father and his trusted three disciples. We are now very tight in this relationship thing. And Jesus says, "Talitha cum." Why does Jesus say, "Don't tell anybody"? We don't really know. We don't really know. I think personally, because it's ridiculous, right? This girl is going to be running around and everybody knows that she's dead. Why does Mark put that in there? I think it's almost like Jesus is saying, this is an intimate moment between us. And I don't want to share it with anyone else because you are important and our relationship is important. And then it's almost like to put a little period on the end of the sentence that Jesus knows who you are and cares about you. He says, "Get her a sandwich." Get the girl a sandwich. She's hungry, for heaven's sakes. This empathy and sympathy thing, as I start to wrap up in the video, Brene Brown says, "I know what it's like down there, and you're not alone." Or, "I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone." I think about Kirkpatrick Church and The church in the heart of the community with the community at heart, and everyone is welcome, especially you. Are we an empathetic church, or are we a sympathetic church? And the answer is not one that you can just sort of quickly say, this is who we are. We're meant to wrestle with this. Are you an empathetic person or a sympathetic person? When a tear forms in someone's eye, are you the type that does this over and says, here's a Kleenex? Or do you let the person cry a little bit? It's hard. What is the answer? Apparently, Mark is telling us that to Jesus and to God, time and death do not mean the same things that they mean to us. And they're not something to be enslaved by or to be afraid of. Not even death. That it's about relationships and empathy with each other. As I wrap up, we have a God. If you're thinking about how does this involve your daily life? What's relevant in this for you? You're going through something right now. You're going through something in your life. And if you're not, you were going through something a little while ago. And if you weren't, you're going to be going through something. Those of us that are older know that this is axiomatic. This is true. You're going to be going through something. We have a God, I always say this, who chose to come to us in the form of a human baby, helpless, and go through an entire lifetime of pain and rejection and suffering. Betrayal by his best friends, called out of his mind by his own family, sentenced to death by an empire that thought he was a piece of trash and needed to get rid of him, and indicted by his own religion, his own people. And he didn't short-circuit the process. We have a God who knows exactly how you feel because he's been down here. He's been down here, and he knows how you feel. Amen.